Compact Classics presents masterpiece summaries of 101 of the world's greatest books. Selections taken from the bestseller The Great American Bathroom Book, a reader's treasury guide into the works you've always wanted to read, but haven't had the time.
Don Quixote de la Mancha by Miguel de Cervantes, a symbolic Spanish novel set in Spain in the 17th century. The principal characters are Don Quixote, Alonso Quijana, a retired country scholar turned knight-errant; Sancho Panza, a rustic barber who becomes Don Quixote's squire; and Dulcinea del Toboso, Aldonza Lorenzo, a village girl. Alonso Quijana was an ordinary Spanish country gentleman, except in one particular. He was addicted to books of chivalry. He spent every moment engrossed in thick, meandering tomes, filled with tales of knights and squires, magicians and giants, and beautiful ladies. At last, he began to sell parts of his estate in order to buy even more books. Devoting whole days to reading them, Quijana allowed the estate to fall into neglect. Still, he paid no notice and continued to immerse himself in his romantic stories, until finally, from so little sleeping and so much reading, his brain dried up, and he went completely out of his mind. And so the poor man, who had read so much about great knights of the past, now came upon the idea of becoming a knight himself. He poked around his house and found a moldering suit of armor left by his great-grandfather, polished it up, and put it on. Other odd knickknacks, including a helmet visor hastily made of cardboard, added just the right touches to his armor, and though his attire looked ridiculous, Quijana imaged it to be the finest in the world. Since every good knight needed a horse, Quijana went to his stables, where he found only his dilapidated old nag, its hide blemished and its hooves full of cracks. But fancying it a healthy, noble steed, he renamed it Rocinante, for superlative nag. A knight, as well as his mount, ought to have a dignified, sonorous name, and so Alonso Quijana determined henceforth to be known as Don Quixote de la Mancha, after his native village. Finally, before roaming the world to right wrongs, Don Quixote chose his lady-love, a buxom country girl, Aldonza Lorenzo, famous for her skill at salting pork, and upon her he bestowed the title of Dulcinea del Toboso. Decked out in his clattering armor and dreaming of fame, the Don wasted no time in mounting Rocinante and setting out in search of adventure. Early in his travels, he happened upon an inn, which he imagined to be an enchanted castle. During his stay there, he persuaded the bewildered innkeeper to officially dub him a knight. Meanwhile, back at Quixote's home, two of the townsmen had learned of their friend's strange departure. Blaming his foolishness on the books of chivalry, they conducted a rollicking inquisition, ordering dozens of the books to be burned. Then these men decided that they would pursue Quijana, bring him back to the village, and cure him of his madness. Quixote by this time had already run into his first adventure, freeing a young boy from a flogging by his master. Later he challenged a party of puzzled travelers, engaging them in battle. But Rocinante tripped, sending Don Quixote to the ground. The travelers seized him and promptly beat him senseless. Quixote then returned home long enough to cajole a rotund, unrefined barber, Sancho Panza, into accompanying him as his squire. With Sancho in tow on Dapple, a small ass, the duo fell into outrageous undertakings, usually springing from Don Quixote's hallucinations. On the plains of La Mancha, the pair spotted a cluster of huge windmills. Quixote instantly declared them to be giants, and despite Sancho's protests, charged on them with lowered lance. The great arms of a windmill caught the knight and his steed, and sent them both rolling. Quixote blamed the disaster on the work of a magician who must have changed the giants into windmills, in order to deprive me of the glory of overcoming them. Occasionally, though, the deluded Quixote came off the victor, as when he heroically broke up a band of innocent Biscayan travelers. He continually mistook the most common sights for exotic vistas. Once he insisted that a far-off herd of sheep was, in reality, an evil army, and launched an attack on the poor animals. This noble intervention only brought a volley of rocks from the angry shepherds whose sheep had been scattered. The knight also charged a funeral procession, claiming that the pallbearers were devils carrying away a princess, forced himself to undergo a solitary penance in the mountains, and mistook a common barber's basin for the magical helmet of Mambrino.